where else, ladies and gentlemen, where else do you get these harmonies?
Hey, I hit that hole.
Where
right
else?
Now.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Scattered Roots podcast. Rudy laying down some gold for your head tops.
Harmonizing, you know.
Yeah.
What's up, guys? Thank you so much for tuning in today, and welcome back to the Scattered Roots podcast. Again, I am Rudy. This is my boy.
Hola, me llamo Kevin.
And I think we're gonna have another episode today that we are kind of just going with the flow, right? There is,
AKA, we did not plan this.
well, we just spent like 2 hours.
Pre-production was a mess.
Pre-production was kind of scattered, but
Scattered Roots. Burn, 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 burn. Drop the air horn.
Sometimes you just gotta figure it out as you go. Mm-hmm. But I think we came up with some pretty good.
I think it's a good analogy for life. You know,
Facts.
We are a reflection of this existence we call life.
That got very deep. Whoa, okay, philosopher. For sure, we definitely kind of came to.
So what is it? I'm at the edge of my seat. I forgot what we talked about for 2 hours.
I think it's gonna sound kind of like, I don't know, like random when we like bring up the topic, but I think there's a lot that we can really dive into with it. And
right.
I think it's specifically today we're gonna talk about like parenting and what that has meant for us and what influences and like what our experiences.
Mom, don't listen to this one.
I mean, my mom.
I'm just kidding, Mom.
You know what's funny? I tried to explain to my mom that I started a podcast.
¿Qué es eso? ¿Qué es un podcast?
It was so hard. She did not understand.
Nomás hablan, o sea.
Like I showed her the YouTube video, and she was like, "Oh, estás en tele."
We come on between El Gordo y la Flaca and.
So I don't think she's gonna listen to this, but
my mom definitely listens.
I think, right, when we talk about our culture and our experiences, right, and discussing the dynamic of finding ourselves, you know, the way we were raised is a huge part of that. And so I think there's just a few different levels that we can analyze it, kind of starting with ourselves and then our parents and then maybe moving into the future, right, of what that means for us. Future.
If you know, you know.
Yeah, if you know, you know, because I don't know. I'm just... Where's that from?
Squidward, bro.
Oh, all right. Sorry, I'm not cultured. All right. Well, let's get to it. But yeah. So that's what we'll kind of be opening the door on today. So, parenting and what that's meant for us. And so, and again, keeping in mind what the focus of the podcast is, which is culture, right? And like what.
Really? I thought we were here for shits and giggles.
I mean, right now,
guys,
it seems like
definitely is culture I'm playing.
Right now, it feels like it, but yeah. So I mean, I don't know, Kevin. Do you have anything you want to start off with, kind of just off the bat?
No, we can end it here. No, I'm just kidding. Parenting, that's interesting.
I think it's good to establish kind of like what the main pillars of parenting kind of are.
So we talked about this obviously before this. So we mentioned safety and security, right? I think that's probably...
And this is not like scientific or backed by literature in any way.
No, we're not philosophers.
We don't know anything. This is literally just like in conversation what we thought parenting meant.
Yeah, I mean, your parents should probably definitely feed you and
for sure.
clothe you to some extent.
Basic needs.
Provide basic needs. They're responsible for you. Discipline.
Discipline was a big one, and I think that's one where like really culture plays a big part in that, right? Kind of what that looks like.
What
for
else did we say? We said I think expectations or something like that.
Expectations was another one. And then like being loving and affectionate.
Oh, right, of course. I don't know anything about that, so that's why. Big one. That's why I forgot about that.
And I guess I do want to like preface that like this will probably be, we said this about a lot of episodes, but a kind of precursor to another episode where we have someone on that is potentially a parent, right? That comes from a similar background as we do, or like can speak to a like Latino-American perspective being a parent, because neither of us are that.
Not that I know of.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just kidding. Comedy style, guys. Comedy style.
I hope not. But yeah, so I think we will. That's a good discussion to have. But that's more focused on, right, like what being a parent is like. I think today we're discussing what parenting for us has been.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly where to start, but using one of the pillars to help us. I guess let's start with let's go with discipline.
Okay. So
were you disciplined as a kid, Kevin? Were you a bad kid?
Define was I did. No, I honestly don't think I was. And you can ask my mother if you want to have her on as a guest. But no, I don't think I was. I definitely had strict parents. My parents were very strict. But I was never physically disciplined, if that's what you meant by that.
Yeah, I think when people ask that, it's where you...
No.
Did you get your ass whooped?
No, literally never. And what's crazy is I think everybody perceived my parents, like, by everybody, I mean, like, my uncles, aunts, like, everybody outside of my immediate family perceived my dad to be, like, this jerk, because my dad has, like, a very mean-looking face or whatever. And because I was such a good kid...
He has the face of a discipliner.
Yeah, and because I was such a good kid, people thought that I was like traumado and didn't want to do nothing because he like would. But
you were scared.
Yeah, but it couldn't be further from the truth, right?
Gotcha.
Like my parents were definitely strict in a lot of things. I think the main ones were like school. So I think this one leaks a little bit into expectations for me personally, for sure. Because again, I wasn't out here like being a badass. I wasn't in the streets. I wasn't whatever. Like I just. For whatever reason, I just either didn't want to be, didn't need to be, or I was to some extent, right? But like responsibly, I guess you could say. So I didn't need any of that disciplining. But my parents were very, very strict with school, like grades. Like I was a straight A student like all my life. And
that's why you're so smart now.
I don't know about that.
Kevin's a genius if you guys didn't know.
False. But no, but I'm serious. Like if I made a B, I was getting grounded. Like that's facts.
And what was grounded?
I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't because I wasn't going out, right? So I mean, I couldn't go out, but no TV, no like video games, right? Like just go to your room and go to sleep.
Yeah.
Right. Which didn't happen. Again, it never happened. I literally made all A's.
Okay, dweeb.
Until like high school, but
loser.
Shut up.
Yeah. No, I think so. Like you mentioned that like you weren't physically disciplined, and so you were disciplined through, I guess like
no, so like
not being able to do X.
Me regañaban, right? And the thing was, I didn't need to be. I'm about to ask you if you were, but like I don't know, when my dad said something, I believed him and I stopped.
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly
I fell
what
in
I was
line.
gonna ask. Yeah,
like he didn't need. I'm sure if he needed to, it might have got to that. Probably, it might have got a spanking when I was not a gadass or something. I don't know.
Is there one that you remember like at all? Like I know you said you weren't physically disciplined that much, but like, do you think? If you were, like, do you remember any of that?
It's gonna sound fucked up. No, actually, like the very little, I guess, would be like in sports, in soccer. And so my dad was a typical like a jerk parent, kind of like.
Yeah, was he like the parent yelling on the sideline?
Yeah, and I was trash. I was super trash. I started playing soccer like way late, and so I was garbage. And so after the game, he'd be like, man, pinche, ¿pa qué te traigo? Que sabe qué? I wish I had stayed home. You wasted my time. Da, 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 blah, 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 whatever. Like, and I think one time he might have pulled my ear. Once, maybe.
Oh, like, that's it?
That's vámonos. Yeah. Vámonos. You're like, I'm tired of watching you waste my time. But yeah, no, like, that was just because I was trash.
Do you think that, like, the verbal abuse there, or I guess, hold on, I guess let me take a step back. Do you think the verbal punishment bordered on abuse? I
don't know. You will have to ask my therapist. I would say no.
Well, because I think sometimes it's hard to answer that question because we don't want to frame our parents as an abuser.
No, for sure. But right? I don't think I would literally say no because I don't think I felt abuse. But someone outside looking in might say it's abuse. You know what I mean?
Kids being abused.
Yeah,
like
but I didn't construe it as such. Yeah. I didn't. Right. And again, it might be because of that. It might be because but even in the moment, like I was bummed out or whatever. But I never would thought like, oh, my dad's such whatever. Like, like it. I do think it had an impact later on. Like, I don't think I didn't enjoy my dad going to my games for a certain period of time because
facts.
Because I just knew it was gonna be.
I'll speak on that later. Yeah,
it was gonna be negative energy, right?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
But yeah, no. So yeah, you're right. I know a lot of people would say don't want to frame their parents as these whatever, like having these toxic traits. But in the moment, I didn't construe it. I didn't perceive it as abuse or anything. So I would say no. But I can see how someone on the outside looking in would say like, yeah, he was
like verbally abusive.
Yeah.
What about your brother? Was he not did your discipline look the same?
No.
Did he get hit?
So me and my brother are very different. And I think my brother did need a little bit more encouragement in some areas. And so I do think he was regañado a lot more.
These ass whoopings is encouragement.
Yeah, I think he might have got a couple pow-pows here and there. I don't know. I don't really, but he and again, he'll speak to this better than I would. he didn't necessarily fall in line like I did in some aspects, right? Not that he was not by any stretch of the imagination like a badass kid either. Like we know badass kids, right? And he wasn't.
Chris is a good kid. Shout out to Chris.
Yeah, for sure. But he slacked a little bit in other areas like school. Again, my parents like their main concern. My dad's always like his number one saying ever was like, "Tu único trabajo es ir a la escuela." When we were little. Right, tú no te tienes que preocupar de nada. You don't have to worry about nothing else. Just go to school and go to grades. And again, we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but why? Because education was our way out of our current circumstance of like, quote, not poverty. So less, what's the word? Less privileged, I guess. I forget.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
I get what you're saying.
Education was our way out. So he like always like emphasized
that.
Yeah, emphasized the heck out of it. Like you have to go to school and you have to go to college because that's how you're going to be able to provide for your future family. And that's how you're going to be better than me. Right? Because I'm a construction worker. I'm a this, I'm a that. And I don't make much money, but you're going to be able to like sustain yourself and your family through school. So
for sure. That
was his emphasis. And Chris didn't like school as much as I did. Let's just say that.
You were a nerd.
Fuck you.
Hey, bro. Hey. I had so much respect for...
Let me just say, like, that's where... You know how in, like, our first episode we talked about, like, my kind of feelings towards this country and, like, the resentment? That was a big fire behind me, like, doing so in school. Like, that was my motivation. Like, that's why I didn't have to be disciplined. Because, like, I saw how this country treated my parents that I was like, you know what? Like, I need to go to college and I need to, like, put on for my family, and I need to be able to like give them what they, like I want to put them in a house.
This country can't do to me what they did to my parents.
Yeah. Like I want to put them in a house. I want to help them get their like residence. I want to help them do all this stuff. So like from a very young age, I think I dead ass. My mom kept like all my homework ever. I'm getting way too specific. My mom has kept like all my homework and essays or whatever from like all time. Like she has old ass homework assignments. There's like an essay from like the 3rd or 4th grade, like when they're teaching you to write. It's stupid essays, right? At 3rd or 4th grade, you're not writing very deep shit. And I just write about like wanting to get a scholarship to go to school. As a 3rd or 4th grader, talking about wanting to get a scholarship to go to school, and not like a sports one, because I wasn't playing sports. Trust me. Because I knew that like I wasn't gonna be able to afford it. That's the only way I can go to school, and that was my goal from day one.
Earlier, yeah,
that was my goal from day one.
Like the resources that you have, like growing up as a parent.
And so that was and so again, that's why I didn't need the harsh, just because there was other circumstances, like how I perceived my parents' status in this country, that I was like, nah, fuck that. Like I'm gonna put on, and I'm gonna make sure their status is much better later on down the line.
Yeah, we're gonna help kind of bridge this gap, and put us in a position where we don't feel the same things.
Yeah.
Like, right, like moving forward, one, like our kids, but like also like our parents now, like in retrospect, where they don't feel the same things that they felt before. No, for sure, that's it.
Yeah, so I had that. But what about you? Were you disciplined a little bit more?
Oh, but I used to get my ass taxed, boy.
Sheesh, ¿Cómo? ¿Con Chancla?
Nah, I was never. So you know what's funny?
That's so stereotypical.
It's like the Chancla has like this iconic status in like Latino, like Latin America, and like comedy, and like the Chancla,
like in Coco.
Like, yeah, exactly. And I never once saw a chancla in my life. Me neither. Like I definitely like see like where that comes from.
Yeah.
But it's too weak of a weapon.
Yeah, it's not.
You know what I'm saying? What are you going to accomplish with the chancla? You can't whoop my ass with this chancla. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. Maybe we just didn't have the expensive chanclas that really hurt. You know? I don't know.
Or maybe it's like the wielder, man. Like the beauty's on the eye of the beholder. The chanclas in the hand of the,
of the whooper.
Yeah, of the whooper.
But no, yeah. I used to get disciplined because I was a bad kid. And when I say I was a bad kid, I acted out. Right, like, and some of that probably is reflected even in my personality now. Right, there's definitely moments where I can be kind of loud and an outgoing kind of person. Where if you're a kid doing that and you're acting out in this way, you're not supposed to, right? Like like you'll get disciplined for it. So that's just always kind of been my personality a little bit, and I would definitely cross the lines. And as a kid, and that's something that's important. Like I think discussing, and I think we will hear in a moment, it's hard to control the emotions of a kid, right? The way a kid acts out, the way that they express themselves. As much as we really want them to do it in like a responsible and fun and like easygoing way, like kids don't know any better. And so sometimes I think our parents didn't recognize when it was kind of there's a better way to go about this than whooping this kid's, behind.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, like I definitely understand like where it came from. But the one thing that I do want to, I guess, emphasize for me in particular was I used to get my ass whipped by my mom. Just my mom.
The discipliner.
Just her. And this has, and we'll talk about it again in a moment, but that has now impacted me to where, like, if I have kids, that's kind of the expectation that I have.
You want your wife to do the pow-pows?
For sure.
You don't want to get your hands dirty?
And that's the thing.
Are you willing to?
It's first. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And it's not that I don't want to, but the dynamic that I perceive of my parents now is kind of, in some ways, rooted in that.
Mm-hmm.
Because my mom being the discipliner, I feared my mom because she was the one whooping me. But I feared my dad because if my mom is like whooping me and making me cry, Lord knows what would happen if my dad started. Like, this is a big, strong man.
He was the final boss?
My mom is like small, she's like 5'4",
yeah,
like, what I'm saying? Like,
so she was like level 1.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
your pops was like...
My dad was like level 100.
Level
like,
99
if
Charizard.
If this strong man, like literally tried to whoop me, I'd probably die. You know what I'm saying? Like, so even him just threatening me with discipline was enough to like, I'm there.
Would she ever be like, me hagas llamar a tu papá? Like, don't make me call your dad?
Sure. Yeah. And I'm back. Literally. Yeah, exactly.
You should have started with that, mom. Jesus.
And even now, right, that I don't fear my mom in that way. I almost respect her for it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, she was, because I'm sure it wasn't easy to discipline me, right? It's not easy to discipline your child. You don't like it, I don't think. Unless that, you're...
Maybe.
Maybe, right?
I'm just kidding. No, I'm sure she didn't.
But it's not fun. Like, it's...
Like, in an ideal situation, you don't have to do it.
Exactly. So, nowadays, like, I make jokes to her about it. I'm just like, hey, mom, remember we used to, like, whoop my ass? and she's like, no, I didn't. Stop talking like, blah, blah, blah. But she knows what's up. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
You did this to me, mother.
You did this to me.
Look at this scar.
I love her and respect her for it, right? And
that's
so
interesting.
That's now what I project moving forward.
So I was going to say two things there. For me personally, it was my pops that did the regañados again.
And that's what I was going to ask you. What about your mom? Like,
yeah, no, my mom, like, very, very rarely, at least for me, I don't have any, like, memory in my head of her. I mean, I'm sure she might have, but I just don't have, right? Any memory of any memory that I have of being disciplined is my father, like, giving me a stern talking to. Because that's what, again, our disciplines were.
Right now, us talking, this just kind of, like, popped into my head, is our outcomes, or I guess we ended up going to high school together. Mm-hmm. So, to a certain extent, our trajectory was similar in a way where, like, we had to be semi-good kids to end up being, right, like where we are now.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so I wonder what it's like for parents that had kids that completely fell on the, like, outside of that,
That's
right?
tough.
That were, like, really, really bad. Mm-hmm. That ended up... And I'm interested in trying to understand, right, the Latino-Americans... Because there's a lot of them out there that have parents that... Same circumstances as our own... came to this country wanting better for their kids, and then not trying to be rude about it, but like they literally threw the opportunity away almost, mm-hmm. right? They just came here and started doing things that they weren't supposed to be doing, XYZ, and I think that's another perspective that we can't really speak to because again we ended up kind of in a similar trajectory, but if it was more of a parenting thing, if it was specifically like them, I wonder
there's
what
so many things to circumstances to how someone might end up. So it's tough. But the other thing I wanted to real quick just touch on, not to completely switch, but because before I forgot it, was the fact that it was your mother disciplining you. Again, it's like another very Latin stereotype that the boy is like very much like mommy's boy. Like, you know what I mean? Like la mamá like lo chiquea a lot.
Yeah.
But in your case, like your mom was like the one giving you the whoopings, which she still also whenever it was kind of going into the affection side of it. I don't know if we're done with discipline, but if you want to go into the affection, was she also the one mainly providing the affection?
We'll
was she
use this as a good transition for that because that's kind of the next pillar we want to talk about.
See that transition style?
Dang, drop. Boom. But it was I guess let me take a step back, right? Like one, like again, now I respect my mom for it. And I think a lot of that is because she did love me so much like now, right? Like she was the one that provided me that love and affection. And I knew that it was never because I never like questioned like, why is my mom like whooping my ass, right? I know my mom loves me. Like she's doing it for like my betterment.
How
But I
was
do
she
think
showing
gender
you?
had a somewhat of a role to play in it though, because I have two sisters, and my older sister never,
By either parent?
ever.
Was she just a good kid?
I mean,
I'm legitimately asking.
some of the bad things that I used to, so personality wise, she's maybe a little bit more toned down than I am. But as far as like doing things, a lot of the bad shit that I was doing was because of her. she showed me the ropes. You know what I'm saying?
He's completely snitching.
Again, my parents won't watch this. Like, and she was responsibly bad, I guess is the best way to put it, right?
Okay.
Like, was she 16, 17, going to parties, getting like drunk, you know, living this?
Yes. No. I'm kidding.
Yeah. Like
yes. Okay.
She was.
Okay.
Right. And so I learned it from her, but for the most part, that's not why I was getting disciplined, because we did a pretty good job of like kind of keeping that under wraps. Like our parents really didn't know.
You better hope that they don't listen to this one.
They won't, bro. And so, yeah, she did it, and then my younger sister even less. Like she's babied, like very like.
That's
very much so. But that's because she's so much younger than us.
Yeah.
She's 8 years younger than myself. 12 years younger than my older sister, so that probably has more to do with like her just being the baby as opposed to being a girl. But no, yeah. Now to kind of like transition to the next point.
Well, I wanted to ask how your mom was showing you that love and affection, because you said she
and that's
did
what I was gonna say.
Okay,
So my mom was.
Because it's important.
It's at probably even a bigger pillar than discipline, right? Like discipline is just kind of
it's almost like the foundation.
The foundation of parenting. Yeah, absolutely. She was just there for me in a way that, and I don't mean this to like throw my dad under the bus, but like my dad wasn't, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, right? Is especially like with our backgrounds, like being Latino men, very affectionate, like didn't know how to speak to me in a loving way. Was
the dads are the men are always son secos, right? And
they're very dry.
And I just think it's because they have this mentality of like working, you know, they just gotta they get their shit done. They don't have time for kind of like,
they're preoccupied with so many other things, and so many other concerns, and a lot of it is because of the expectation that's placed on them sometimes.
And actually, before we leave that part, yes, a lot of times it's not like there's no condemnation of them or whatever, but I think it's also because they're a product of however they were raised, right? Like. Like for my dad, right? Like I know my grandma didn't necessarily have like she was so busy. He was one of like 7 or whatever, and my grandpa was blind for pretty much all of my dad's life. He lost his sight a long time ago, and so like they received no affection growing up. They don't know what affection kind of is, sort of, and then they just kind of continue that cycle on. And
yeah, and I think that's kind of what we talked about as far as like framing the conversation, right? 1, it's our experience, but 2, it's our parents.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to jump to.
No, you're good. And it's hard trying to find a way to like have this conversation without almost touching on what like the next layer of it is. But yeah, like you're exactly right? Like I think again, my dad was very dry. He didn't really know how to speak about loving me. I definitely think he showed love for me in certain ways, but not in the way my mom did, right? Like my mom would hug me, like I would kiss my mom. Like if I was ever having a bad day, like I would just go lay down and like, you know, like hug her and like lay down, and we would sit down, and I didn't even care what was on TV. Like I just like being in her arms like comforted me in a way that like I would never go lay down in my like dad's arms or sit on his lap or even like go tell him that I had a bad day, right? Because he's sitting on the couch. He just got home from work, like he's sitting on the couch watching TV, just chilling out. He probably doesn't want to hear about my kids as a like my problems as a kid.
They took my lunch money.
Exactly, bro. Like you don't want to kind of almost talk to your dad about that. At least that was my reality. But my mom, I would, because she was much more the soft, comforting energy in our household. Yeah. And I think and I don't think that like in my circumstance, gender had much to do with that. That was just kind of the roles. And even now, even now, my mom's still the same way. Like, even as, like, you know, myself and my older sister are adults, and my younger sister's coming into adulthood, my mom is the one that we go to for that kind of comfort. And with my dad, it's a much more dry kind
They're
of...
very practical people. The men, the Latino men. It
is what I would say, but...
Because I feel like, yeah, like similar to you, my dad wasn't really like going around hugging us and like saying like I love you, te quiero. Like, I'm sure he said it here and there, right? Like, for sure. But yeah, it wasn't like he was showing a lot of affection. But I always knew that he loved me. You know what I mean? Like, I never in my head was there like a resentment or like a wishing there was more type, you know?
Do you think it manifested itself in like sports?
What do you mean?
Like, that's how he showed, like, you're like...
Oh yeah. Him spending time with us, like, that was his thing. His love language would be like quality
sports.
time.
Yeah.
Well, quality time, period. But sports, because that's his passion, ended up being sports. But yeah, quality time. Like, I actually, like, later on, like, as we were kind of older, dude, we would, like, literally every weekend, like, instead of me going out with my friends or whatever, I would just spend the entire day with my parents. We wouldn't be doing nothing. We'd just go to the mall and, like, window shop. That's literally every weekend that I can remember with my parents, right? It's just spending time with each other, right? And yes, sports.
And you still do that now, right?
Yeah.
Like as a...
Yeah.
As an adult, like...
Yeah, sometimes whenever...
Saturdays,
before the panoramics, before the pandemics.
Hey, look at you picking up culture jokes.
Yeah, we would literally just go to fucking, like, North Park. Like, hay que ver qué especiales hay.
Yeah.
That's, you know, we're not going to necessarily looking for nothing. We're
go
just...
to the food court real quick, grab some, and just walk around.
Yeah, that's very much how he showed love, was just spending time. And I think, again... not to leak into the next topic, but he was a product of that. Like, his own dad wasn't able to spend time with him because he's blind, right? Like, how is his dad gonna, like, play sports with him, right? And so he always said, like, yo nunca tuve un papá that spent time with me. My dad never spent time with me, right? Like, my dad never once took me outside and kicked the soccer ball with me. So then he would, like, I'm gonna do it for you, right? Like, you know, let's go play soccer, let's whatever. And yeah, that's how it kind of meant. And I think he ended up becoming a coach and, like, coaching my brother, and we were just always together on the field, right? And that's kind of how he showed his affection. It was never what people would say typical, you know, like, te quiero, hugs, kisses, right? Like,
yeah, and I think that's a very common I guess experience for a lot of people in our circumstance. Now, we are both first generation Mexican Americans. I don't know, or I guess you're Mexican Guatemalan, right? But your dad's the Mexican one. I don't know if that's different for maybe like other countries. Like, I don't know if in whether it be like Southern American countries or wherever it may be, maybe men are a little bit more in tune with, like, being able to show love and compassion and affection. But I definitely know, like, Mexicans are kind of rough around the edges just in general. So they're like, men are like vaqueros, right? Like, they're this kind of like strong being. So being able to show that love and affection is difficult just in general for them. And even in a relationship, right? Even when it's their significant other.
Yeah, we can talk about that too. And that ends up impacting us later on again, and that's a part of what we're going to talk about. But
yeah, do you think like that like seeing the way your parents show love and affection?
100%. I know it's impacted me. Like, I don't think I ever saw my parents be very affectionate towards each other. And again, I knew they love and they do love each other. Yeah. Right. But my dad's dry. They're just dry. Right. Like that. They show love in other ways.
Do they hold hands?
So, like, on the very rare occasions that we would see them, like, oh, we're going to the store, we're at Walmart or whatever, and all of a sudden they're holding hands, and me and my brother would literally look at each other like,
what's going on?
What the fuck are they doing?
Is everything okay?
Yeah, why are they holding hands? Like,
hold my hand.
Yeah, dude, should we? Yeah, is that like a thing? Like,
what are we to do?
Are we like a team act now? Yeah, no, it was weird, right? And they don't call each other like names that often. I think now they do. Now I think they've learned, like, kind of like the sort of quote unquote error of their ways a little bit, and they've become more openly affectionate, and now they'll say like amor or whatever. But like growing up, I don't think they said that very much. They didn't call each other even like nicknames, like, you know how they call usually como estuvo tu día, gordo or flaco or whatever, right? Like gordo, flaco usually are like what? No, nothing. Like,
yeah. And I think this is a good time to just start like asking about that specifically, right? I think our parents probably didn't get a good chance to spend much time breaking down the impact that kind of dynamic had, right? The way that we are right now, right? Like right now we're discussing how our experiences and our parents' experiences impacted the way that they show love and affection. And our parents didn't have that opportunity all too much, right? Like to sit down and talk about like, hey, do you think the way that I'm, hugging and like telling Rudy or Kevin like that I love them, do you think this is going to impact their growth the way that like we are right now? And that's just a part of like not being comfortable or even used to having those type of conversations and knowing where to start.
Definitely.
Right? Like,
and yes, I agree with you. And I also think that another aspect of that is that that's not their biggest concern, dude. Like they're going through so much struggle that like, even if like they're not cognizant of it, right?
For
like
sure.
Their worries are how am I gonna like pay for these bills? I I just got fired. I got let go of my job because I didn't have proof of citizenship. Like all that type of shit. So like it's hard to think, because in the grand scheme of things, it seems like a lesser priority, right? When
for sure.
It's not.
When like survive, like it's hard to get good at. It's hard to even acknowledge that you need to do something, yet alone get good at it, if you don't have the time to even think about it, because you're thinking about everything else, right? About living, about surviving, about doing what you need to do to get from, this week to the next.
Very practical people.
Very practical people. But we do, right? Because now we're like doing it right now. We're taking the time to break down the dynamics of love and affection between our parents. And I'm willing to bet $1 million that my parents never went into like a conversation this deeply, among like at least as consistently as I think I've had, because I've had this conversation before. I'm going to have it again in the future. When I start having kids, I'm going to have this conversation a lot. And so I think that's just a I guess, privilege that we as a first generation, second, what Latino-Americans have, as opposed to our parents, that is really impacted the way that our parenting styles would maybe differ moving into the future. But yeah, do you have anything else to say about love and affection?
No, I other than without going into the next stuff, like it definitely. I think like what you were saying, they didn't have the time to do it then. Like at least for my parents, I know that they've now have, like I said, they've started to open up more, and they've started to have those discussions, not in the same amount of depth. But like I agree with you, and I just want to like emphasize that like again, it's not these quote unquote like negative aspects or whatever, their lack of affection or whatever. Like it was just a product of the times. They were very much like a product of their circumstance.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like again, like. They were raised a certain type of way that impacted them, and then
I'm sure
and then they didn't have time
to
and they didn't have time to, like you said, figure out what those impacts like. They didn't have the time to think like, oh, my mother or my grandma, his mother or whatever, did this, did that, or didn't do this, didn't do that. How is that going to affect me with my child, right? So,
yeah, for sure.
It's just kind of, you have to keep it pushing, right? You kind of have to keep it pushing.
You do have to stop and analyze, and then get really understand, right, like the situation, the behavior, and the outcome of all of it. And our parents just maybe didn't.
Yeah, and I also, there wasn't that much information out there for these things, right? It wasn't encouraged, like we said earlier. Like this type of stuff wasn't just at the forefront.
Yeah.
And period, general, and like in society as a whole, I don't think.
And there's not like science behind it, like the way there is. Like I feel like when I hear Americans talking about it, right? Like there's like specifically discipline is one of the biggest ones, right? Where it's like, well, the science says that like disciplined children do worse, XYZ. And like if you were to tell that to like I think a Latino parent, they'd be like, what science are you talking about? Yeah, exactly. Like what science about whooping ass is there that could like stop me from whooping my kid's ass? Like no. Like that kind of conversation isn't had at all, where it is had here.
Yeah. I think with like the advent again of like the internet, of things like just internet, social media and stuff, you get more exposure. I think we've talked to this. Like again, that impact cannot be understated. Now you start to see what like the bigger picture is kind of, and you get insight on things outside of your immediate bubble. that could help kind of break down a little bit of those barriers or whatever that are in your own head.
You just get a much better understanding of like the overall, I guess, idea or like of what parenting is. Yeah. And I think that's really going to become advantageous to us.
Exactly.
Right. Like moving forward. Especially because, I mean, again, specifically in our circumstances, I think we're in a position where we can take the time to think about it. And I look at someone like my sister, right, who she's technically a Generation Zero because she was born in Mexico, but she got here when she was 2 years old, so she's very assimilated into American culture. We have this conversation a lot about, you know, like my nephews, her kids, and how she has taken the time to really understand like the impacts of like our parents' behaviors and her own behavior. And even so, like a random example would be like the other day she was disciplining my nephew and was making him go read. And then in my head, I don't know what I thought about it, and I was like, you should not discipline him by making him read, because then he immediately associates reading with being disciplined as being a bad thing. You know what I'm saying? Like when you're in trouble, you read.
I don't want to read.
Exactly. I don't want to read.
It's a conditioning.
Exactly. You're conditioning him to like not like reading. You should probably discipline him in a different way so that he doesn't associate like being disciplined with reading. And she was like, you know what? Like, you're right. That makes sense. I doubt that our parents like ever thought anything. You know what I'm saying? Like being bad, get the belt. You know what I'm saying? Like get the switch, whatever it was. So I think hopefully moving forward, we'll see a change in that. And
being bad, go eat some candy. That way you stop eating so much candy.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, for sure. I think we're gonna do a lot better in certain aspects. We'll probably do a lot worse in others, but
for sure. I think there is a beauty in not over analyzing things like that as well, because like you're just doing what your instinct is. And
let's fast forward a little bit, and I don't think our parents did bad jobs,
for sure,
right? As limited as they were or whatever, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, so we talked about discipline.
Discipline, love, and affection. I think another big one was like just expectation,
right?
And then
so I kind of touched on that a little bit.
You discussed it a little bit. And this is what I found interesting is that you said that your parents really expected you to do well in school, for you to.
Again, that was my job, quote unquote. Yeah, my only job.
I never heard that.
And my dad was always like, he was like, you don't need to get no part-time job, because you know a lot of people from in similar upbringings as us, like they go to work with their dad, like in the summer. Why not go to work construction or get part-time jobs? And my dad's like, fuck that. You're not gonna get a job.
Show them the value of like hard work is kind of like the.
But no, my dad was like, you don't need to do none of that, because at the end of the day, my vision for you is that you're not gonna be killing yourself the way I am physically out here in the sun or whatever. Like you're not gonna be banging up your knees. My vision for you is to sit in an office all day and make bank.
Just make.
That's what he would tell me.
Dweeb like you do now.
Yeah, and hey, look, he spoke it into existence. Because all I do is I sit at my laptop and I go clickety clack, clickety clack. Man. But yeah, no, that was his thing, is that he didn't want, because he has back problems. He was a floor installer, so he did like carpet and stuff.
They can just speak to the difficulties of living that kind of life.
Yeah, manual
especially
labor.
Being of their age. Yeah, for sure.
So he's like, fuck that. You're gonna do better, because I'm working my butt off and I make this much. You're gonna work way less harder and make this much. So that was his goal for it. So yeah, his education was an expectation, because that's how he saw. Like he's like, you're not gonna get that unless you have a college degree. So he doesn't know a lot about things. And that's the other thing, real quickly, that doesn't necessarily maybe tie into this, but I wanted to quickly say it, is that being first generation and not having any mentors or outside or people that have done it before, it's tough to make those kind of like calls and decisions on like where you want your life to go, right? Like for me, like I'm like, okay, I need to get a good job. You know, my dad would just be like doctor or abogado, because that's like the stereotypical like rich people job or whatever, right? But I'm like, well, I'm good at math. Like I don't really know. And then whenever I went to Townview, I'm like, oh, well, engineering, math, like I'm good at this. Let me just do this. And then when I got to college, I'm like, what kind of engineering? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I guess electrical. And it was just kind of like a random choice.
Like winging it.
Yeah, I just wing it, because I don't know, and nobody taught me how to do it. No one taught me like to take AP classes or not take AP classes or study for the SAT or not. You know, like no one. I just had to figure it out. Like again, we went to a school where like that was the whole point. So they kind of prepared us for it, but I didn't have any like body to.
You didn't have that reinforcement at home, just because they didn't really know how.
Yeah, my parents don't know shit about that. Like my parents don't know nothing about applying to colleges. And
like even when I took the SAT, it was like I didn't ever even explain to my parents that like I'm gonna go take the SAT. I would literally like sign up for it and be like, hey, like on Saturday, can you take me to this school because I gotta go take this test? And they'd be like, okay. Like,
yeah.
you know?
So real quick, because you kind of said it in a pre-production, what was your parents' outlook on education or like their expectation for you?
So for me, I don't think I ever felt any kind of expectation.
Period. Like
at all.
Okay.
Really. Like, and maybe that's just me feeling a certain like way that I don't know if there was, right? I don't know if my parents projected an expectation on me and then it just kind of happened to work out. But they never were like, you have to get an A, you have to get a B. Again, like if I got
you have to be this.
Yeah, if I got a report card, I did not have to show it to my parents if I did not want to, because
buddy,
they would not know. Like to a certain extent, like sure they'd be semi-aware, like oh, like an A is a good grade, a B is a bad grade, but they weren't like on me about it. They weren't like checking in on me about it. It was just more so that like there was a general understanding that like oh, like being a good kid looks like doing well in school. My sister is doing well in school. I want to be like my sister. And it just kind of happened, but I never felt like this expectation placed upon me. The only place I really felt a certain type of expectation was in sports and like with my dad. And we talked about this earlier, right? Like this is kind of going to touch back a little bit on what we were talking before, but like they're like, that's where they show their passion. And, you know, like I remember my dad just yelling at my games. Like I didn't play soccer, I played basketball.
We should have a sports podcast.
But we do, yeah. We'll talk about that one day. But that's the only time I would see like
the women would not listen. Apparently,
that's where I would see a lot of emotion from him. Like that'd be the only real time. But I hated it. I hated like this idea of like him yelling and like expecting something out of me when I was like, dog, like I'm a kid. Like
I suck.
Calm down.
Why I suck?
I did not suck.
Whatever.
But you know, there was just like this passion about it. But that was maybe the only time where I really felt like.
So before you get out
pressure.
of the expectation, did they ever? Because I can't speak to this, but you being a middle child or at least having an older sibling, did they ever like expect you to be like her or compare you? You know, you're not like. Did you ever feel that?
I didn't feel a comparison.
Okay.
I think if there was ever a comparison that I guess I felt was more so on my own.
Okay, of your own volition.
Yeah. Like I wanted to, and I've said this a million times. My sister's my biggest role model in life, and if I get to live my life like even half as well as she has, I've done it, right? And so I want to be successful and have a good family and like do all these things the way that my sister has. And I've always felt that way, like growing up, right? Like she has good grades, like she has fun, like she does XYZ. Like I want to do.
But
those
that just came naturally.
Things. But that just kind of came. It was never like a projected thing. I do think there is a difference that I think my parents had with us that like was kind of underlying but never really stated. Like I think as a guy, I felt a certain level of expectation to be the provider in general for the family. And my sister is right now. Like she is. And when I say that, I think that kind of has to like go back to like being a first generation Mexican American where like our parents are going to one day like really rely on us. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure your parents do right now, right? Like they don't have a retirement fund. Nope. They don't have this like I'm gonna move to Florida and you know like it's more so on us. So I did feel some expectation there. Like eventually like I'm gonna have to.
What's a 401k?
Be the provider. Yeah, like and you know what's crazy is, and maybe this is a completely different podcast, but like this is just our parents not understanding financials in that way, right? Like my dad knows what a 401k is, but the other day or previously he would ask me like, should I take all my money out because like there's an emergency. And I was like, no. Mm-hmm. Like, there's other ways around this. You're thinking of, like, a short answer. And I think it just speaks to the overall dynamic of, like, not being prepared, like, for certain things.
Gotcha.
But no, I think going back to, like, expectations, I think my parents did a great job of just, like, making it known to me that, like, hey, you want to live a better life than we did. That's why we're here. The expectation for you is for our sacrifice to not go
in vain.
To waste. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Right? Like you've seen what it's been like for us to have to
do
struggle
better.
and, you know, like not have everything that we wanted. Yeah. And you should take this opportunity and do well with it. And I think that's kind of the only real expectation that I've really had in my life. And I respected it because I remember growing up and be like, I want to be successful for my parents. I want to do this for my parents.
Yeah.
I want to do this for myself and my parents. And that's kind of been the only real like forced expectation I think I have of myself, which I really appreciate.
Mm. Yeah.
But yeah, do you have anything else to?
No, yeah, that's the exact same feeling that I got. Like, they emphasized it through education, but that's always the end goal. Is they're here, they made the sacrifice, they made that jump to come to a foreign land where they're not wanted a lot of times and don't belong a lot of times, and
are uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it's all for the sake of the betterment of their
being better for sure. And I think all we can do is really try to return the favor and make the most of it. And I think so many people can relate to that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And before we move on, the concept of sacrificing your life for your kids, right? So like they can like live a better life, I think is one of the ultimate signs of like love and affection that you can really show.
Yeah.
Tying it back to like the previous point.
Like it again, you don't.
They may not know how to show it.
And you as a kid maybe don't realize it in every moment, but there's definitely moments, at least for me, that I remember in my childhood, maybe where it got hard or it got tough or I was mad or whatever. And I'm like, you know what? Like, dude, like, they don't need to be here. Yeah. Like, we could live in Mexico.
And not even here. Need, but like what they want. Yeah. Because I know my parents now want to probably
live in Mexico. Yeah.
Right.
But because I knew that there was a sacrifice for them, I'm like, no, they're doing this because they love me. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What else? I think the other pillar, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because we've had a really good discussion about the others, but just security and safety, right? Just I'm not a parent, so I don't know what this is like, but raising a human, right? Like their safety and security is probably your main concern.
Yeah, and actually
for a long time.
We could probably dedicate this one because we could turn this into like, I don't know. A lot of parents are strict, right? In this sense, again, like my parents are strict, but you know they say the whole thing like there's like those jokes on like Twitter where you're like, oh, I have to ask my mom for permission. They're like, dude, you're 25, and they're like, yeah, yeah. So like, duh. I still have to tell my mom. I want to live. Yeah, I still have to tell my mom where I'm going. Like, you know, like that's the thing is like parents like they're just very protective, right?
For sure.
At least mine were. I don't know. I mean, everybody has their own experience, but I'm sure a lot of other people's were as well. But
that probably plays a little bit into like discipline, right? Like I'm sure, like if they were,
it all comes together.
A stricter parent, they probably were.
We're gonna be such great parents.
Hopefully, bro. Like I really do think that as a people, right? That's kind of how we really make progress in this world. And I think that's something that people that are in a better place in life, whether that be, you know, financially, like mentally, like whatever it is, have identified that upbringing is so important, right? And it goes beyond just like what we perceive as successful and like a good upbringing, but it's everything else, right? Like mentally, physically, like just like your well-being, right? Like eating well, like having like good conversations about like your mental health. Like that's, I think, what I really want to take and like help improve in the next generation, like with my own kids. And as a people, we have to, so that we as a people do better. But yeah, I think we're already touching on that conversation where like kind of future generations, and what that's gonna look like. Do you what do you think that'll look like for you? Like as far as like your parenting now, taking what you've learned and what your parents have.
I'm not prepared for that, man. Are you kidding me? I'm gonna fumble the back, fumble the baby.
I believe in you.
No, yeah, like you said earlier, we're having these types of discussions, so we're able to reflect, and we have the time to reflect and see the impact that certain aspects, right, that were lacking, and certain aspects that weren't, and the results that they had, and I'm sure our assessment isn't going to be perfect all the times, and we probably have, like we as like first generation kids or whatever, have our own issues, right?
For sure.
That result, that come with the result of like our parents' toxic traits.
Everything we talk about here.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, everything that this podcast is about.
Yeah. So like a lot of us might need like therapy, or a lot of us might need to unpack a lot of things. Like a lot of,
Backtrack. But everybody needs therapy, ladies and gentlemen. Go see a therapist.
All right. You heard it here first. Well, no, you didn't. It's been a thing. But no, yeah, I agree for sure. And so, if we're taking the time to have these sorts of discussions, I think it bodes well. But, like the future is to be seen, right? Like I think for me personally, one of the big things that I want to work on, because I know it's a thing, and I know it's a thing now for me, is making more deliberate displays of affection. For my kid or whatever. Or show it in different ways, or figure out how he or she needs it to be shown earlier, right? Like the concept of like love languages. Like I don't know, right? Like what he responds to, and so
understanding your kids and like doing well to like cater to those. I think that stems from seeing something in your parents and either doing one of two things: doing it or doing the opposite of it, right? So like in this circumstance, like your dad was kind of dry, unable to be affectionate in this way, right? Deliberately be affectionate with you. So now you've taken you've made the decision in your head to change that.
And not because I think that I needed it, because I think I turned out fine, but because I think the impact that it had on me and now how I display affection can be problematic with other people. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Because other people aren't used to my way of showing affection. You know what I mean? Like, so.
And I think you see benefit to it, right? Yeah. Like, not like, again, like you turned out fine and like you feel comfortable with like who
and
you
like
are
I love
person.
my dad, right? Like I don't feel any type of way, but
yeah, just being able to teach someone to do this so that they can.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's hard for me to now like turn on the switch and be like,
for sure,
lovey-dovey affectionate, man.
Absolutely.
Like it's tough because I don't know what that looks like.
And nurture is like a big part of that. Hey, we got through this without saying nature versus nurture.
Is that a good thing?
I don't know. Maybe we didn't break it down well enough.
I failed AP psychology.
Oh, you took AP psychology?
I'm just kidding. I didn't fail. I passed that AP exam too.
Again, Kevin is a genius.
I passed every AP exam I ever
Did you
took.
pass everyone?
Mm-hmm.
I hate you, bro.
19 for 19, baby.
Hey, I respected you so much. 19 AP tests.
Yep.
I had so much respect for you, bro. Yep. Hey, that's why I helped you win prom camp.
But I did get a 3 on it. Ooh, yeah, you did.
Because I thought you really...
I peaked in high school.
I think...
I was a loser, but I peaked during prom.
I think you just really represented what being a cool nerd was in high school. And
we were a school of nerds. And so I was the king of the nerds that day.
Shout out to SES. But no, the only thing that I wanted to mention as far as parenting, again, I think what you were talking about, I completely agree with. But to kind of tie it back into like culture and identity, I think that's kind of, and we've talked about it before, right? Like with specifically like the example we used was speaking Spanish, right? Like helping my kids maintain as I parent them.
Oof, we didn't even talk. Yeah.
Their culture.
Well, that's a big one.
Right, like it's huge, and we can dedicate a lot of time to it. But I don't want to, speak on this forever. But that's one thing I am very appreciative with my parents is that I still, I guess now at least feel a strong attachment to my culture, my identity, my language, my music, my food, all of it. And so
I don't know about that one. I think we saw the contrary last episode.
I enjoy it. I may not be the expert in the lyrics, but
Continue.
I enjoy the music. It gives me the feeling of being who I am.
Yeah.
But like help and again, right? Like sure, I can't recite lyrics of a song as well. So imagine my kids. Right, they're probably gonna like struggle more than I do. So keeping that in the fold with them is gonna be something that I really do want to make an effort, especially because I feel like that's like a paying respects to my parents. Right, like this is where you come from. Mm-hmm. This is these values that we hold, like music, this culture that we have is a beautiful one, and so we should not lose it. As much as like you are embracing this new culture that you have being a second generation Latino-American, right? Like our roots matter so much. And so it'd be interesting. I guess that would that would be better there'd be some really good questions to ask of a parent now, right? That's raising a right, if they're a first generation, raising a second generation mocoso or mocosa.
Yeah.
What it's been like, right? Like
un escuincle.
It and I think it's just good to like surround yourself a cipote. Yeah. Oh yeah, we talked about this. And it's just good to have culture around you when you're raising someone, and that probably helps. But I think that's the only real thing that I'm gonna really keep in the back of my mind when I start having kids.
Yeah, man, we went a little long, but it sucks because I think there's still more things that we could say on it, and I almost feel bad cutting it. But we're starting to lose the people, I feel like.
Never.
No, they rock with us.
Hey, shout out to the homies listening and everybody that's been rocking with us. Big shout out to our ever faithful interns, Monica, Fabi, much love. But yeah, I mean, do you have any final thoughts about when are you gonna have kids?
Shut up.
I'm ready.
When are you gonna have a relationship? How about that?
Ow, that was mean.
You were here talking about parenting. You got to find a mate first.
Yeah, I know.
I guess you don't. But
I'm taking my time.
Well,
stop asking me these questions.
You gotta catch up or something. Like,
hey, you know what I'm saying?
When you gonna have kids? About you gonna be grandpa, dad?
Hey, man, it'll happen when it happens, Kevin.
Well, you keep putting this energy on me, I'm gonna give it back. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, fair.
I got a little bit combative here.
Fair, bro. No, but yeah, man. I mean, I'm ready to be a podcast uncle. You know what I'm saying?
A podcast uncle?
Yeah, bro. You know what I'm saying?
You are. You're an uncle.
I'm a real uncle, but I'm ready to be a podcast uncle.
Oh, buddy, get in line.
But no, yeah. Any final thoughts?
No, man. No, I mean, like I said, there's more stuff to get into for sure, and we may revisit this a little bit. Like you talked about keeping our culture alive. There's other things like raising your kids without certain toxic behaviors, right? Cutting out a lot of like that's the toxic traits that we know are like racism, colorism, homophobia, like all it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. But
it touches so many different aspects.
Yeah, there's so much to being a parent that I'm not ready for. So
and I think that's maybe where I'll end, right? Again, like we are talking or speaking from our experience, just being raised by, in my circumstance, like Mexican parents, in your circumstance, like Mexican Guatemalan. The other side of the coin is actually being one. And so I think at some point that's going to be a discussion that we should have, is right, like raising someone with a even more mixed identity. So hopefully we can have a really good interview or conversation in the future about that. Yeah. But I think that about does it. Thank you guys so much again for listening today and hanging in there with us. We did go for. I'm surprised we were able to have such a good episode on such a short notice, and
we'll see. Y'all let us know if this was good or not.
Hey, fuck that. We did well. Thank you.
Leave a review.
No, but thank you guys again so much for listening.
Follow us. At ScatterRootsPod on Instagram. Coach Kev Ortiz for mine.
Rudy.dtx. Hey, you know what I'm saying? Follow the TikTok as well.
TikTok.
You know what I'm saying? Go leave a review. If you leave a great review, I will love you forever.
You'll love it forever.
Y'all have a good rest of your day. And thank you guys.